Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next session with the amazing Sylvia from Agora Prep Academy, who is going to share with us all things about not all things. It's too broad of a subject, but neurodivergent learning. It is so needed in today's world, and we need more leadership like hers to help us support these magical little humans. So take it away, Sylvia. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Jeanette, for having me on here and for welcoming me as a guest speaker. I am so excited to share this topic with you because this topic is so near and dear to my heart. Um, I know that neurodivergence sometimes is a newer word. It came about just recently. Before, we used to call it autism. Before autism, it was called Asperger's. It was called ADHD. It was called a lot of things. But over time, the labels have changed. However, the thinker or the learner or the child that we are talking about remain the same. So the face of ASD or autism spectrum disorder has evolved in terms of labels and categories, but this has existed for many, 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 many centuries and since the beginning of time, because this is not, and I'm going to say this and I might shock you, a disability. So neurodivergence is learning differently, which means that this has always existed. Where there is great creativity, great art, great skill in one specific area or foray, that person had thought differently. They pushed the boundaries of what we see is possible or normal, and they surpassed it. So I challenge everyone to always think to themselves, why is neurodivergence such a big thing now? Oh, it always was. It's just that we have decided in our education system to limit our ability to teach those who think differently. We teach to the average, and not everyone is average. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly because before I can dive into a discussion about neurodivergence, I want to be able to show you what some people or what the face of neurodivergence looks like. So if we ever look, you want to ask, what does a divergent person look like? A neurodivergent person or a divergent in general? Divergent and convergent. There's two words, okay? Divergent just means different. We've got Emma Watson. We've got Tim Burton. We've got Einstein, who is the synonym for intelligence and intellect. When someone says, oh, you're trying to be a little Einstein, that's what they mean. They mean someone who is extremely smart. We've got Steve Jobs. We've got Sir Anthony Hopkins. And I like calling him Sir just because he got knighted and it's a nice name. Billie Eilish. We have Elon Musk and Dan Aykroyd. Those are just some of the most famous celebrities that have A, been lately diagnosed with ASD, B, have been highly researched, and we now understand that they had some form of autism or ADHD or what we call a singularity or a genius, something that they are really, really smart in. Now, we also have Charles Darwin, who was a naturalist, geologist, and biologist. We all know him as the father of evolution or the theory of evolution. Emily Dickinson, who's a poet. Michelangelo. So if you've ever walked into the Sistine Chapel and thought to yourself, holy moly, who could have possibly dreamt up and painted all these amazing frescoes on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel? It takes someone who's neurodiverse to be able to produce something like that. That amazing. Sir Isaac Newton and Wolfgang. I was floored when I went and researched. The reason I did, and I'll tell you this as a backstory, was because I had a child who was recently diagnosed. Their parents took them and they got them diagnosed, and that child was well aware of the fact that they are different. And they came to me as their principal and they were telling me that I'm really sad. I'm sad that I'm different. And I had to sit there and be like, are you kidding me? This world would be missing so much if you weren't in it, because your purpose is so much greater than you even recognize. The fact is, being different is amazing. It's the best thing to be. You don't want to be like everyone else. Who wants to be just like everyone else? So I had to go down and deep dive into the different people that this child might know, that they can look up to. And I actually found today's celebrities, like celebrities from today, like musicians and actors and actresses. But I also wanted to impress upon this child that people like Thomas Edison, that we teach them all the time about these amazing inventors, because Agora Prep is all about invention and inquiry-based learning. So they come to us and say, who invented the telephone? And we're like, oh, Alexander Graham Bell. Oh, and by the way, he was a divergent learner. And they'll be like, okay, and who wrote this song from the 80s? Oh, it was Bob Dylan. And by the way, he was on the spectrum. And we talk to them about all different kinds of poetry, of writers. And if you look at this list, this is just a part of the list of people that are divergent learner. So I wanted to just give a quick like wow moment of when we think divergent learners, we're thinking only autistic children who are nonverbal, who are sitting in the corner of a classroom, really struggling, or we're thinking on the opposite end, someone who has Tourette's, who's swearing and saying things off the cuff and they're cognitively impaired. That is not cognition, and cognitive impairment does not mean divergent learners. Actually, cognitive impairment is a completely different case scenario. It has nothing to do with neurodivergence. So I wanted to talk about modes of thinking because this here is what we're talking about. Convergent versus divergent. Where did the even term neurodivergent come from? Well, divergent thinking is the ability to use your imagination and come at a problem with many solutions, many ideas to solve one problem. It's also called creative horizontal thinking. Okay. It's what we do when we're brainstorming. When a bunch of executives in the marketing company are trying to advertise a new product, they get together and they're like, let's brainstorm. That's called divergent thinking. And then convergent thinking is using logic. It's when you say to someone, there's only one way to get to the answer. And here are the facts that equal that answer. It's very critical, it's very vertical, and it's very analytical or linear. So linear thinking is basically the yes or no, 2 plus 2 is 4. Regardless of what you say, it's going to always equal 4. However, the way you calculate 2 plus 2 can be done in different ways. My children, for example, the other day, they were talking about 99 plus 5. So my son was saying, oh, 99 plus 5. So what you do is you add 99, 10, you add 10 to make it 109, and then you take away 5. And I'm like, okay, does that work for you? And he's like, yeah, I think it does. It's 105. And my daughter's like, nope, that is wrong. What you do is you borrow a 1 from the 5 and you leave 4 behind. So you can make it a nice whole number. 99 plus 1 is 100. And then you've got 4 left. What's 100 plus 4? And he goes, 104. She goes, exactly. Well, my third child pops in and goes, actually, how I did it, what? And I'm like, okay, so there's 3 different ways to get to the same answer. That's called divergent thinking. And this is what I always help my children understand, that your thinking can never be wrong. You just have to come at it the way you need to. Neurodivergent thinkers come at the same conclusion we do in their own time and in their own way. They experience what we think convergent reality differently. And then lateral thinking is what we teach at Agora, and that is thinking outside of the box, but using both divergent thinking when needed and convergent thinking when not. Understanding about for example, the periodic table. It is what it is. That's a periodic table. They need to know it. That's a convergent thinking type of exercise. Okay. H2O does not mean anything other than 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. H2O. That's convergent thinking. That's right and wrong. But then when we say to them, when they come to us and say, why does war happen? There is no convergent idea to this. There's no convergent answer. Oh, well, it's because people are greedy. That could be the correct answer, but there are multiple other variables. There's many reasons war happen. Religious differences, unaccepting of each other's humanity, greed, power, politics, all of it, all contribute to the history of war. So in that case, what we would do is tell them, okay, well, let's divergently think about this. Let's brainstorm ideas as to why. I want you to research both sides of the war and understand what they're fighting about, what they could possibly be fighting about. Okay. Next, I wanted to show you the 4 C's of digital learning. And this was brought into place because we realized that our education system isn't pivoting and isn't moving as fast. So whether they're online, whether they're in person, the fact is these are 21st century skills. And these are the 21st century skills that we really empower students with, and we should be empowering, whether we're homeschooling, whether we're in alternative schools, whether we are even having just a regular discussion with our children. We need to think about these 4 C's: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. I'm going to go into this a little more. Foundation literacies. So this is how you have to be, there are certain things you have to apply that are part of the peer-to-peer sort of competitive environment. You need students in alternative care and in homeschooling to still be able to compete with their peers in regular schools. So the way we do that is we make sure that we bring these 4 C's into developing their foundational literacy, their competencies, and their character qualities. So the first one is literacy, numeracy, scientific literacy, ICT literacy, which is computer technology, financial literacy, and cultural and civic literacy. Understanding what's happening around you, understanding where you are and where you fit in the picture of a society, who you're going to be when you get older. Your voice is heard. Even as young as 4 years of age, you can make change. You are powerful. You are a leader. Competencies like critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, communication, collaboration, the 4 C's. We do that with every type of project, every type of topic we assign to them. We tell them, let's critically think about it and let's be creative in presenting it. Let's communicate to one another and collaborate together as a group in order to show synchronicity or show understanding and present to each other. So this is applied in every kind of course program that we do or any kind of learning hub that we have. We encourage the 4 C's at all times and we involve them or integrate them into our program. And then character curiosity, initiative, persistence and grit, adaptability, leadership, social and cultural awareness. Now you're probably thinking, why are you teaching me about 21st century skills, Sylvia? Like, what does this have to do with divergent learning? Well, here we are sitting there and saying, this child is autistic, this child needs accommodation, this child needs an IEP, this child needs diagnosis, this child talks a lot, this child doesn't talk at all, this child can't go to the washroom right now on their own, this child can't sit still for 6 hours, this child blinks too much, this child eats too much, this child doesn't eat enough. And we're sitting there so busy, hyper-focused on figuring out and being critical and linear thinkers, convergent thinkers, thinking to ourselves, none of these kids fit the mold. But on the flip side of it, we have to be teaching 21st century learning skills that speak specifically to the divergence in learning. So here we are trying to teach divergent thinking to what we want to be typical children. It doesn't make sense to me at all. We're caught up in this vicious cycle of wanting kids to be like every other child and be norm referenced and really have milestones and compare students to each other's portfolios through report cards and through grading. But in schools, we are trying to teach them how to think outside the box. It makes no sense to me. And I feel like we are psychologically damaging children and hurting their self-esteem and confidence when we say to them that all of you need to learn the same thing at the same time in the same way and produce the same results via testing, via rote memory. I think it is the worst waste of time for us, and we are really wasting an incredible resource. It's an untapped asset. National, international asset is the child's ability to divergently think, or what we call creative genius. So what does a 21st century learner look like, or what should they look like? Well, we should be teaching to our children, our current generation, who are going to be our future leaders. I want you to really think about that. Future leaders, they are going to decide for us how we structure our government, how we mandate and distribute goods and services and laws, how we help other countries. They are going to be the leaders in science, in healthcare, in innovation, in invention, in every sector. These are our children now. Time passes very quickly. They are going to be at the helm of global change and global management. So we need to prepare them for that. We need to make them good communicators. They need to be globally aware. They need to be problem solvers. They need to be self-directed, because believe it or not, we no longer live in a society where there's a teacher standing at the front of the class teaching us. That shouldn't be the case. In a few years, most people are learning now skills from YouTube. In a few years, it's all going to be digitally driven. We're all going to be online. We're all going to be communicating with people much like this through Zoom or other platforms. And we are going to be searching up topics or degrees or, certain interests, inquiry-led learning on our own. I don't know about you, but if I need to fix a fridge because I have to change the filter, I've never done that before, but I'm about to call someone in to do it. I'm going to YouTube it. YouTube it. The fact that we even made it a verb. Hey, you could YouTube that, or you can Google that. That's self-directed learning. And that is going to be the majority of how learning happens in the future. They have to be innovators, because God knows there's a lot of systems that are broken, a lot of equipment that is broken, a lot of things that can be done a lot better. So if they can take whatever we've invented humbly and innovate on it and make it even better, that's what they're born for. They're amazing that way. They can assess the need and they can make things better. They have to be financially and economically literate. So divergent learners are very good at finding new ways of making and investing money. So you have to understand, if we can trace back blockchains, cryptocurrency, digital currency, regardless of how you may feel about it, some people love it, some people hate it, that's fine. The fact is, I bet you dollar to dollar, dime to dollar, that whoever invented that was a divergent learner, because they were able to think outside of the box, outside of the bank. So financially and economically literacy is very, very important. Our students and our children have to learn about entrepreneurship, about sustainability, about fiscal responsibility, about taxes, about mortgages, about debts, about loans, about living, off the grid, on the grid, about growing your own food, about helping others and charity, about nonprofit, about capital investments. They have to learn about all this stuff, because we need to prepare them, like I said, to become the world leaders. They have to be information and media literate. We can't keep saying, oh, screen time, screen time, screen time, screen time. Listen, I understand if your kid is on a screen for 8 hours a day, it's not the best thing for them. But if 6 of those 8 hours, they're building communities and like my daughter built a full mall on Roblox. It took her 4 hours. She asked me ahead of time. She said, it's going to take me a while, but I need to build this so other players in the game can develop their own shops and I can become the landlord. I can become the mall real estate landlord. And I said to her, that's cool. After a couple of minutes, she came and said, what kind of stores do you think I should have in my mall? I'm like, I don't know, maybe like a few clothing stores, And she's like, okay, I want to make my mall a little bit more, forward thinking. It's not just shopping for clothes. And I'm like, okay, way to go, making me feel really shallow. So what are you going to do? She's like, I think I'm going to do stuff for pets, like animals, people take care of their animals. I'm going to do stuff for travel agency so people can go out and travel and see the world. And then I'm going to do like a health center in my mall, a medical center, so that different people can go and get, their diseases fixed. That's how she said it. And I thought it was adorable. So I'm like, yeah, go for it. I mean, it's so different than what a mall should look like, but I mean, it's your mall. And she's just like, yeah, I'm going to try and change what a mall looks like. I want it to be a mall of services and a mall of resources rather than just a mall where you spend and waste money on clothing. And I'm like, all right, you do you. But she spent 4 hours on a screen that day. And I can't tell you the value of how much she learned in terms of financing the project and sort of building it, knowing about putting hallways in the proper way so people can, patrons can access washrooms. She was building up the parking lot. Like she built everything. So you can't turn around and tell me that 4 hours of doing that and learning that and the kind of skill sets that she was gaining is different than you spending 4 or 5 hours on a self-paced course at Harvard University. It's the same. So we have to be very careful when you speak about screen time. It's very negative. It's very negative. It doesn't have to be. We can, using it properly, using the right platforms, using the right software, we can use it as a way to not only make our children information and media literate, but also to be teaching them because there's interest there. It's engaged learning. They have to be collaborators. They can't live, they don't live, on an island. So if your child is a divergent learner and they don't like socializing, I understand that it's hard for you to push them to socialize. You still have to take them to an environment where they are pushed outside their comfort zone. That's called the stretched zone, according to Vygotsky. And we have to really stretch them a little bit, even though they're uncomfortable with it, in a loving, safing environment, in a loving, safe environment, not safing, safe environment. We have to be able to make them a little uncomfortable with the social interaction, because even though a lot of the students who are neurodivergent, they're in their head, they're excellent geniuses, they still need to be collaborators. They still need to be civilly engaged. That includes other people. So eventually they have to deal with other people in their life. And part of us preparing them to be not only functional but successful world leaders, we need to let them know that this is a hurdle, it's a weakness, but they can overcome it in a loving environment. Elon Musk was very much that way. So he's on the spectrum and he had a hard time speaking. He had a hard time talking to other people. His mom didn't say, okay, well, you stay in your room and just become the genius you're going to become, which he did. She actually pushed him and told him that he needs to interact and deal with other people. Finally, we have to make sure that our children are great critical thinkers, because the world has so much on the way that's going to challenge them, and it's going to make them feel like they are not in the right for feeling the way they feel. We have to get the critical thinking piece down, and we have to show them how to make sure that every subject, every issue out there needs to be critically thought about before we pass judgment and before we decide to agree with them. So at the end of the day, neurodivergence is not an illness. It is not a disability. Divergent learning is the way of the future. It is actually something that we need to be teaching our kids rather than shying away and trying to hide our children from. The other thing is we are so busy labeling and categorizing and saying this child is this child is that. We're not paying enough attention to the fact that we need to be adapting to this neurodivergent and divergent models, and that we need to shy away from the convergent way of thinking and really elaborate and really grow the divergent way of thinking. It's the only way that we're going to be able to achieve success. That's my piece, and I'm sticking with it.
Well, that's so great. It's true. Our kids are there's so many different ways to think and be, and, when they're given the tools and, strategies to be ethical leaders, there are no limitations to what the future can be for them.
Exactly.
And it'll take time, I think, to adapt that thinking to scale. But I think we're on our way. So
Let's keep preaching the message. Now that you know that these people that I presented to you, I bet you were surprised at some of these people.
no, I've worked with the population, so it was less of a surprise for me, but a lot of
Yeah.
people don't realize. I know, like, my husband's brother, he is neurodivergent, and he is doing satellite, like the self-driving maps, all the sensor. He's coordinating that kind of for a major company, but it's a very specific personality and brain type that could tackle that kind of, I guess, creativity.
100%. It's a singularity. It's like they're so in their head and they're so smart in this one area that it exceeds everybody else's abilities. And that's what makes them genius in their own right. Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
just need extra love in some of the other areas, and
We all do.
we
We all need
do.
extra love. Spread the love. Everybody needs to be loved and accepted for who they are. I'm a late diagnosed on the spectrum, and I have ADHD. And I realize now why I never really quite fit in with everyone growing up. Knowing now what I know, I realized, oh my gosh, that's why I was so bored. That's why I was such a little troublemaker when I was younger. This is why in high school I was like, are you kidding me? I have to do 4 years of this? Like I'm ready. I'm ready to go to university now, right? And I realized that I was just academically very intelligent, but there's so many other areas that lacked that I wish I had. Like my mathematical skills are just they're off the charts, like missing. I have no idea where they are. Someone needs to put an APB on my math skills, but I could sit there and while my kids were going 99 plus 5, remember that story I shared? My son was like, yeah, you add 10 and you take away 5, you got 105. And I was like, yes. My daughter's 12 was like, no. And I'm like, I'm not your math teacher. I don't know. I'm your mom.
Yeah,
Whatever. You guys talk.
Jillian was actually covering that. So it's funny that like, your kids covered all the strategies she had discussed. I'm like, oh, it's
Yeah,
amazing.
just on their own.
Yeah, how
Yeah,
it's incorporated. Like, you can meet all of their needs in different ways, like just
yes.
teaching multiple strategies. And that's what you do at your school too. So how can people contact you? Let them know so that
8888 5 Agora 5. Just kidding. It's agoraprep.com. So if you go on there, we're very friendly people. Info@agoraprep.com. If you're interested, we have rolling enrollment, which means you can enroll anytime. We're enrolling children as early as 4 and 5 years of age to prep them for grade 1, all the way to grade 12. And we also have amazing summer programs that are coming up. So very excited to share that with our community. And I encourage anyone who has questions. I mean, we have a location in Markham, we have a location in Whitby, and we also have a location in Aurora. So.
And if you want to creep them, just at Agora Prep on all the social medias.
Yep.
And
Yep.
thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Sylvia, for sharing your wisdom and